Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the contrast between the behaviour of the Chinese government in the greater Pacific region. That's the islands sort of in between, if you like, in between here and Hawaii and even the United States, but the greater Pacific region, and the behaviour contrast with the West and the Australian government and the United Nations and so on. So just to give you sort of an idea, there are a number of islands, including American Samoa, by the way. There are a number of islands around the Fiji, the Solomon Islands, and Polynesian Islands, and so on, sort of all around that area. And it's a vast area, that Pacific Ocean thing. But there's a lot of these islands, and there are societies in there that are really, many of them are living the same life that they lived 1,000 years ago. So they're not advanced economies. I mean, some of them are self-sufficient in food, but not all of them. They're things like Western meat is lamb or whatever is being imported there, and the islands, they don't have a sort of patrilineal type society. It's a matrilineal, not all of them, but most of them are a matrilineal society. That is, the line of descendancy is through the woman, not the man. And the reason for this is that women tend to have multiple sexual partners, and don't have marriage ceremonies as we would understand them in the West. So the way you can determine lineage is through the female line rather than through the male line. So they're interesting society. Now, societies that have private property and don't have descendants through the male line tend not to invest in the future. They tend to only think of the here and now, and they don't invest in the future. They're not about building or accumulating wealth or protecting it or anything like that. So these societies tend to be the most basic and the poorest, with again the least investment in the future. Everything is just day to day. So now, what the Chinese have been doing, the Chinese government's been doing all around the Asian and Asia Pacific region, they've been building port facilities. Now, some of it's a little disingenuous. For example, they'll give a huge loan to the Sri Lankan government to develop these quite sophisticated deep water port facilities, and the Sri Lankan government can't repay these loans. So part of the contract, the Chinese effectively get a 99-year freebie lease for that port. So and a lot of the basket case, corrupt governments around the Asian region are easily so. Even in Australia, the politicians increasingly are becoming, banana republic corrupt, and as long as there's enough money on the table, they'll happily sell out their own populace to the Chinese, or anyone else for that matter, the globalists, mostly, but to the Chinese as well. Now, so around that Pacific region, there's the Chinese are building these ports, and they've just recently signed an agreement with the Solomon Islands. Again, another dirt poor basket case, sort of little island nation. Was a few islands actually in that group. So they're doing that, and now you'd think the West would have a response. Australia's been the primary influence in the Solomon Islands for at least 50, if not 100 years. So they've had the chance. Australia's had the chance to really sort of, in effect, control the Solomon Islands. I mean, the aid that they're given. But what does Australia and the West do in Solomon? Do they build something useful like a port that can take large vessels for trading, that sort of thing? No. Australia doesn't do that, and nor does the West or the United Nations. It's straight globalist 101 copybook stuff here. So what Australia does, they'll send gay lesbian councilors, gender studies majors. They'll set up gender studies university courses in the Solomon Islands. I mean, these are dirt poor people who are illiterate in their own language, and they're getting sent gender studies fucking. It's insane. Gender studies academics there to apply their lesbian Marxist bullshit. And so all the Western Australia does, United Nations, they send rainbow flags and again, gender studies, equity, this and so on, so that, to an island nation. Now, that equity crap may work in first world countries where people got time on their hands to dwell on their victimhood, but in places like that, they're not. What? What are you talking about? So they've got a perverse incentive system. The Australian United Nations, for example, they send over supposed legal trainers to tell those naughty, evil, bad, misogynist men over there that they should pay their child support. Now, because it's not a system where man and woman get married, and it's not like that there. So you can have one woman can have 5, 6, 7 children, all by different men. Which is how it's been there for thousands of years. I mean, so they're trying to impose a Western system on these islands and say, oh, you have to pay child support. There has to be a special divorce court to order the men to hand over how many cabbages they've grown as child support, because a lot of them just do operate in barter. They don't have money. So they're trying to superimpose and force this sort of Western style Marxist type morality on the population. I mean, it's beyond absurd. It's quite fantastic. I mean, what about building wells and getting electricity generating, building roads that don't get washed away in the next rainstorm? All of these sorts of things could be done and made as a priority. What about helping some of these farmers? Because the farmers, the further away you get from the main town there in the Solomon Islands, for example, I'm thinking of, the harder it is for people to bring their the fruit and vegetables they grow into the markets in town. So, and they're trying to get away from the barter economy or have that forced on them. So they need to bring it into town so they can sell their products for money and things like that. But the roads and the transport facilities simply aren't there to do it. So people just consume what they grow and live a subsistence day-to-day lifestyle. But on top of this, they're running around with all these lesbian activists, trying to find transgender this and lesbian that and gay something else. And that's where the money and the time's going. So no wonder when the Chinese come along and say, look, we'll build a port. The local government, who have obviously been bribed to go along with it, but the local people going, well, hey, that's all right. We can get plenty of jobs, and we can get, we've got a port there that can have bigger ships in, and all that sort of stuff. So it's a piece of infrastructure that's actually useful. So instead of running around with rainbow flags and angry gender studies people, lesbians, morally lecturing the islanders, then they've got something worthwhile. Now, the way they get away with it, the West doing this moral lecturing bullshit, is they tie it to handouts of money. So they'll only, for example, fund women-owned businesses, but it's that or nothing. So the islanders agree to things only because the white folks are giving money away and giving freebies away. And one time in Sydney, and I was there at this one of these, they've decided to have a women's rights conference in Sydney, where they've got all these women invited from the islands. Now you've got to consider that these are people who've never had a flushing toilet or never been able to switch on a light switch. There are these sort of people, and they bring them to this what would appear to be a massive city called Sydney, and staying in luxury hotels, flying in aeroplanes, and they fly them business class. These illiterate peasants from the islands, they fly them business class to have a women's rights conference from an island that's so dirt poor that they can barely afford to put food on the table. I mean, it's absolutely insanity. But this is how you control and divide a Western society. But it doesn't work so. But they're using the same copybook. That's it. The ideological, bang, we'll do this. Now you can get away with it if you've got the government on side, and you control the media, and people get their information from the media. You can do it then, but you can't do it. You can't really do it in an island, a dirt poor island nation there where the media isn't the main source of information. Talking to each other is. So this is an example of how the West does the dumbest fucking things, and you can see this on the day that the Americans entered Baghdad in Iraq. One of the first things they did was it to help the people distribute food or get the electricity running or get the water supply going. No, it wasn't. It was setting up a gay lesbian counselling service in downtown fucking Baghdad. That's how insane the West is and how consumed with ideological claptrap. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. I thank you for listening.